Hi, my name is Brandon, and I'm an alcoholic and addict in recovery. Today, I'm continuing to look at the tenets of the Recovery 2.0 program that Tommy Rosen puts forward in his book. And I'm going to talk about some specific ones. There are more than just the ones I'm going to talk about today, but I want to talk about some specific ones that stood out to me as important. And then the other ones we'll read about as I continue through the book. So one of the first ones that stood out when I was reading today was that you must understand that food is not an outside issue. And by outside issue, we mean something outside of addiction to alcohol or drugs that in some 12-step meetings and circles, it's not considered appropriate to discuss these things. So, for example, if you go to a Alcoholics Anonymous meeting and you also had problems with other drugs, some people consider those other drugs an outside issue. They don't want that talked about at an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. I'm not of that opinion. I feel like life can't be especially addiction, can't be compartmentalized like that. Everything feeds into everything else, and we have to acknowledge the way all of these things interplay in order to really fully heal. And that's what Tommy is saying here with food. And for a lot of us, for myself included, my relationship with food, really, I still have some problems with my relationship with food. And here's what Tommy says about it. If you think food is an outside issue in any recovery forum, I urge you to reconsider your position. Addicts of every kind will find greater happiness and therefore increase their chances of sustainable recovery by looking closely at their relationship to food. A relationship to food can start to look very addictive, and I would argue can be an addictive relationship, especially relationship to sugary foods, to carbs, and then looking at the way that we eat. Are we eating just to get the sustenance we need for energy, or are we eating purely for pleasure? These are the kind of things we have to start thinking about some. And don't get me wrong, as I said, I continue to struggle with this, although I feel like I've made progress over the last 2 years of my recovery on making some major changes to my relationship with food. Nevertheless, I do believe that it is something that we need to address in recovery in order to assist with the healing that we're trying to find there. One of the next tenets that he talks about is being devoted to a daily spiritual practice. And I think this is by far one of the most important tenets of this or any program. Here's what he has to say about it. Everyone is devoted to something. What do you want to spend the most time thinking about? What do you love and cherish? Drug addicts love and cherish their drugs. They're capable of intense devotion. Drug addicts will go to any length to get their drugs. Any length. And there's no such thing as inconvenience when it comes to getting more drugs. You'll never hear a drug addict say, I couldn't go across town to get my fix. It was simply too inconvenient. It's funny, though, that in working with many people in early recovery, if I suggest that we're going to practice 30 minutes of meditation in the morning for a while, a riot ensues. In recovery, the idea is to show the same level of devotion to something that is uplifting and nourishing to the spirit as you used to show in going after your drugs of choice. By developing a spiritual practice that you do every day, something absolutely magical happens in a short amount of time. You fall in love with it, life gets easier, and you no longer want to miss this great experience. I'll talk more about this later in the book. So I can attest to this, and my daily spiritual practice looks like this. I get up, and I usually do get up and make a cup of coffee first thing in the morning, make breakfast for my son, get him out of bed, and then I will, as he's eating, I'll go upstairs and pray, and I say 2 specific prayers from the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and then a personal prayer, and then I meditate, and that meditation might look like just silent mindfulness meditation. It might be more along the lines of a guided meditation. It might even be, lately I've been doing some meditative breathing work. Regardless, I take some quiet time to really try to connect with my breath, my body, my mind. And then I do what I'm doing right now. I read something about recovery, and then I make a video about it. And that daily spiritual practice has been life-changing, and I'm convinced it has kept me on the road of recovery during times where I otherwise might have fallen off. So this daily spiritual practice, so important. And I also end my day every day by taking the inventory that's suggested in the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, where I look back at my day and really consider whether there were places where I acted out of fear, whether there were places where I was unkind to anybody, and look back and see, is there anything I need to consider doing differently tomorrow? Daily spiritual practice has been a key part of my recovery, and I truly believe that if more people would adopt this same kind of daily practice, and I am talking about more than just praying. I'm talking about taking it a step further and doing even more than that. I truly believe that there are people who would struggle less in trying to maintain their recovery. The next thing that he mentions is that consciousness is contagious, and this is about who do we associate with. Here's what he says. If you want to develop as a person, it is helpful to be around other people who carry the consciousness you want to move forward. When you identify with these people, hang around them and catch the goodness they put out so you can be uplifted and in turn pass it on. This is one of the reasons that it's suggested so strongly that we associate with people at meetings of recovery, that we really embed ourselves in the recovery community. Because the more you're around positive people who are like-minded, who are working toward a goal of something like recovery, the more you feel the need to do that as well. And the more you are encouraged to do so, even during difficult times. So when you start to look at the people that you're spending time with, it's important to ask yourself whether these are people that lift you up or drag you down. And I would argue that the people who lift you up are really the ones who deserve the most of your attention, the most of your time. That's not to say you shouldn't help others who need help, but it is important to look at the crowd that you're hanging out with. And that's why, unfortunately, for a lot of people who enter recovery, they have to cut off ties with old friends who are still engaged in old behaviors, because it just doesn't help their recovery to be around those people. The last one that I'm going to read about today is the idea of following your bliss. Here's what he writes about that. Joseph Campbell gave us the now famous teaching, follow your bliss. He derived this often misunderstood concept from the ancient yogic texts, the Upanishads, which spoke of the journey toward ultimate freedom and connection with God. The idea is that by pursuing what most inspires us, we will end up basically where we are supposed to be and experience a sense of bliss. It is about coming to your true identity. The happiest people I know have a sense of how to use their gifts in the world. The least happy people are those who do not know why they are here and who feel a sense of purposelessness. In recovery, seek out your own unique place in this world. How do you begin? It will always have to do with what inspires you, what you are good at, and what brings you true happiness and fulfillment. And that's been one of the gifts of recovery for me, is that I've been able to actually think with a clear head about what does bring me true happiness and fulfillment. And I found that it's quite different than what I thought it was when I was in my addiction. In my addiction, I had dreams of doing things like winning the lottery and going and living on an island and drinking under a palm tree all day long. And in my recovery, that sounds like a horrible way to spend my life, because that's a purely selfish way of spending my life. In recovery, I am very interested in how I can use my life as a vehicle of putting more good into the world. And spending my time on a beach, spending all my time on a beach, doesn't help with that. I'd like to take some vacations to the beach every now and then, but just totally living a life of selfishness where I don't contribute anything just doesn't fit well with my idea of what truly makes me happy. And in fact, as I look back over my time in recovery, I can see that my happy times in recovery have been during times where I've been doing a lot of work with other people, and where I have been putting a lot into the world rather than trying to take from it. So it's really important to find what inspires you and then follow that. Following your bliss is not about doing what feels good. It's about doing what's right and doing what inspires you. And that's something that for some of us in recovery, it's kind of a new feeling, because we're used to just doing whatever feels good. And that's not what following your bliss is about. Following your bliss is about really finding what ideas make you tick, what ideas make you passionate, and what actions can really propel you to put some more good into the world in a way that continues to motivate you to do that work. So I love the tenets of Recovery 2.0. I think Tommy did a great job of laying them all out. And I know that for many of these, they have been important parts of my own recovery. I'll be very interested to hear what he has to say in the next part of the book, where he gets more into how yoga and recovery can mix together. In the meantime, have a good day, and I'll be back tomorrow with more.